My name is Patty Gorman. I'm the administrative secretary at the O'Donnell Middle School, and I am also the parent liaison for the middle school and high school. Our parent engagement program tries to run a few events like this over the course of this year for parents, some for students. Well, we're going to have an event at the middle school on December 7th. Which is our parent conferences. We'll have Hidden in Plain Sight, which you'll hear more about as it gets closer. So hopefully any of you middle school parents that are coming for conferences will stop in and see us then. I want to thank you all for coming. I just wanted to introduce myself and let you know if anyone has any concerns, any programs they'd like to see come to Stoughton, or anything at all, any issues at all at the middle school or high school level, you can reach out to me anytime at the middle school office, and if I can't help you, I'll find someone that can. Okay, so now I'm going to hand it over to Deputy Chief Holmes, and we'll get our program started.
Good evening. I'm Brian Holmes. I'm the Deputy Chief of Police Department. We're here for you folks. We want to be a resource for you. We want to be here to help you folks. If you don't understand what's going on with your kids, or you see red flags that you want to talk to us about, you can reach us 24/7. Tonight it's my pleasure to introduce Pat Cronin, your speakers, Trooper John Fanning, Stephanie Green of the Evan Foundation No First Time. We also did a show with John Green on the Stoughton Media Access channel last week, talking about some of the issues and statistics in Stoughton. This is not a small problem, it's a big problem regionally, and I hope everybody walks away with something out of this conversation tonight. Thank you.
Oh.
You can go to the next slide. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, so good evening, everybody. Thanks for coming out. We appreciate that. My name is Stephanie Green. This is my husband, John, and we founded the Evan Foundation No First Time about 3 years ago when we lost our son to a heroin overdose. On January 11th of 2014, my son went into cardiac arrest after many attempts of trying to stay clean and in and out of detoxes and rehabs. He relapsed on the 11th of January. It was the last time we saw him alive. So we are here. We definitely do not want to be here, but we're here because we really want to help all parents get educated in case they do see something that's going on. You might pick up on it and you might be able to do something. When my son Evan was 15, somebody got their hands on a bottle of Percocet, and we're handing them out in the car he was in, and without any hesitation, he took that pill. And he got sick, but he remembered the good feeling of that pill, and it never left his head, and he wanted to try it again. So when the next person came along that had these pills, he took them again. And by the time he was like 16, he was addicted to the pills. I think he was probably maybe 16 and a half when we really figured out something was wrong. Things were happening at school, and his behavior was different, and he was sleeping a lot, and he was in his room a lot, and Evan was a really active child. I mean, this kid ran around 24/7 nonstop, and he was very athletic, and he was always doing something with sports, or on his quad, on his dirt bike, playing basketball. He skateboarded like 24/7, and when certain people came into his life, we noticed that all that stuff was going away and he wasn't doing it anymore. So me and my husband looked into it, and we did find out that he was taking the pills. But with the lack of education that we had, and we both have substance abuse on both sides of our family, but we really weren't educated to really know that how addicted he was just to these pills. So we were not putting him into detoxes at that point. We were like just trying to figure out what to do as parents. And without the education, we were just thinking, he's experimenting, you know, he's trying things out, and we just got to really talk to him. And so we were like putting him on punishment, taking away his phone, trying to keep him away from certain people. But in actuality, when we looked back, he should have been in a detox then. But we just didn't know. We didn't know what to do. And by the time he was 17, came all the court troubles, and that's when we found out he was doing heroin. And the girlfriend that he had shot him up. And that was the first time that he went into treatment. And as a parent, you can't even like fathom that your kid would do something like that. You're just like, what? You know, what happened? What is going on? And it was absolutely horrendous for us and for his sister. He has a sister who's now 17. And we still worry about her. So when he was 17, we found out he was doing heroin. We put him into a program right away. And we really thought that, you know, that would be it. But that's not how it works with these drugs. They hijacked his brain and they do to everybody's, and that wasn't it. He came out and he was trying, and it was just again and again and again. And my house was complete mayhem 24/7. I don't know if anybody here has an addicted loved one that lives with you, but it is a nightmare 24/7. And no matter if we had kicked him out and tried not to enable, or we kept him in, nobody could relax. The whole family's affected. It's a family disease when you have a loved one with addiction. We were all up in arms 24/7. Everything in my house was Evan, Evan, Evan. Where's Evan? How can we find Evan? What's Evan doing? And when he was home, what room is he in? Is he alive? And that's how it was 24/7 at my house. And when I do these parents' nights, I always like to tell the truth about everything because I think it's important to really be open. Me and John never sat Evan down and said, you know, we have major addiction on both sides, and you know, the percentage of people with addiction. We didn't do that. Because we just didn't know. So we were just like, you know, drugs can kill you, don't do it, and stuff like that. And that's not really how it works. You really need to sit down with your kids and explain if there's addiction in your family, and you really want to tell them what's going on, because that makes a difference on if they will have addiction themselves. So Evan was, in and out of a lot of detoxes, and we tried everything with him, and we really thought that it was going to end. We just thought because of his age that he would grow out of it. And actually, he got kicked out of high school, and he ended up coming to Stoughton night school to try to get his diploma here. And because of the addiction, he never got to finish here. So that was really tough for us. No diploma, and running around the streets, and me and my husband, it was just crushing for us to live like that. Because every day your child walks out the door, and I used to say to him, you know, if today you use, this could be the last time, and you're going to pretty much ruin our lives. And he would say, you know, oh, Ma, I don't know what you're talking about. That's not going to happen. I'm going to quit this time. But addiction's not that easy to do. You need to really go to long-term treatment. It takes a lot of work to be in recovery. And the whole family has to be on board. And that person really has to want it. And I know he really tried. But with recovery comes relapses. And that last time he relapsed, he didn't make it. And on January 11th, after many attempts, he went to somebody's house that we didn't know, and he couldn't breathe. And the story goes, as we know, he called 911 and in my son's car, drove him to the hospital, and they met the ambulance on the way, and he went into cardiac arrest twice, and there was too much oxygen lost from his brain. And for 5 days he was in the hospital on a machine, and he didn't make it. And our whole purpose for this No First Time Foundation is to talk to children and to parents, to let them know how dangerous just one time is, and that's why it's called No First Time. We want to teach your kids and you that we have to really get it into them and talk to them and educate them that one time is too many, because you just don't know what's going to happen after that one time. One time is deadly. And this epidemic is really out of control, and it's killing a lot of people, and we really feel like education early is one of the key keys to getting it into this so that the next generation doesn't go down like this, because we are losing a whole generation right now. Every single day on my Facebook, I see numerous obituaries of all young people passing away from overdoses. And me and John are just trying to just help out with our story. My son grew up in Easton, and I come from the city, and John comes from Stoughton, and we wanted to put him in a good school system and just have a happy, healthy family. And we know kids aren't perfect, we all do stuff, but we never saw this coming. And it was in our own house. And we were in our big house, and we were working, and we had our nice cars, and we were running around, and my son was getting high. And he was a really good kid. He was a really good kid. He was a handsome, tall kid, and he just loved everybody. And it's never, ever easy for me to come out and tell his story, but I really feel like if more people get out and tell their story and the community stick together, we can really help each other out to stop this. It's taken down so many people. It's devastating, and every day we have to get up and relive it, the whole thing over and over again. And I don't want that to happen to anybody in this room. I really don't. So I really appreciate you coming out, and tonight we have Trooper John Fanning to go over a PowerPoint with you, and then after John, Pat Cronin, one of our speakers, is going to tell you a little bit of his story, and we're hoping that you take this education and open up a dialogue with your children when you get home and talk about it. And I hope it helps you a little bit, and if we can just help one person, then our job is done. So thank you so much for coming out.
When we started walking, he was the fastest kid around. It was always going, always racing. There was stuff I was trying to chase after him, always running after him, just going 100 miles an hour. He was just always full of energy. He was like the fastest little kid. We used to laugh at how fast he was on his little, banging into everything. So he was just full of energy. He just, couldn't stop. Very protective of his sister, which I thought was great for me because I had 2 younger sisters I used to have to fight for, So I was like, that good, I need to protect the sister. So I always said that, it's your guiding angel, you got a brother to protect you, And she loved it. She was always teasing him. She'd always hit him and get him in trouble, and it was just funny. But he's a big sized kid, so he fit in. He had that mentality of you're just an old soul, And I think that's what happened with, him hanging out with his kids at 15, taking that perk, by peer pressure, and just not knowing where it's going to lead him, And me either. And I would think, all right, it's a phase. I went through a phase at young, smoking weed when I was a young kid, and just a phase,
He was only a teenager. He never got to really live and have those things that everybody should have. Can't stand the things that I do. You know that I'm his best, more than I'll ever need. My son thought he was a loser. And, a lot of addicts think they're losers. And, it's tough. And he used to say that he would never amount to anything because of drugs, and then he thought he was a loser. I don't need any, till I need more. And I don't need any, until I need more.
Trying to take my meetings at my church and do all these things, and I was running this disease of addiction. He knew it, he wanted it. He was in and out 3, 4, 5 times with different detoxes. The drug is just too powerful.
Till it swallows me whole.
Well, it's always, can everyone hear me? Sorry, we had audio, so I had to use the microphone there to play the video there that was made, which I think is really important for everyone to see about Evan and what a great kid he was and how he felt and how Stephanie and John felt in that situation that hopefully none of us find ourselves in. So my name is John Fanning. I'm a trooper with the Mass State Police. I'm assigned to the Norfolk County DA's office, where I work in the Homicide Death Investigation Unit, and we go to any unattended death within Norfolk County, which predominantly now is, at least every other day we're going to an overdose. So today, I'm on call actually today from 8:30 a.m. till 8:30 tomorrow morning, and so there's a good chance, even during this presentation, that I get a call for an overdose. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that, and I'll give you a little bit about my background within law enforcement. I was a drug recognition expert for 6 years, where basically if someone was operating under the influence and it was not alcohol, they would need an expert to come in and do the testing and testify on those things. So I learned a lot about the physiology of the body and the effects that drugs have on the body. I was a Stoughton cop for 3 years, from 2002 to 2005. And then I went to the state police. So my career started right here in Stoughton. And Deputy Chief Holmes was my first training officer, as I like to remind him, back then in 02 and 03. So I'm really happy to be back here in Stoughton, where I sat in these exact same seats. And that's my, my professional experience. More importantly, I grew up in the projects of South Boston until about 4th grade, and then I came here to Stoughton. I went to the West School, to the middle school, and here at the Stoughton High School. And I was very fortunate to come to Stoughton and get out of the city. Both my parents were drug addicts and alcoholics. My father died in 2011 to a pill overdose in Florida. He was a lifelong drug addict. My father did, if there's something telling that I always tell people is my father was using heroin in the 70s and 80s when it was a little known drug. It was really taboo. And he survived all those years and ultimately died because of prescription pills in the 2000s, which I think is really telling about where opiates in particular have went to and the progress that it's made in mainstream society. My mother was an alcoholic most of her life. And then when the pill epidemic hit in the early 2000s, she got swept up in the pill epidemic, was never an opiate user. She continued to use pills pretty much until the day she died, although she ultimately didn't die of a drug overdose. She died of COPD in her early 50s. And obviously drug abuse was the main factor as to why she deteriorated so quickly. And it was really a cigarette or a drug that could have caused her to die at the end, and it just happened to be the COPD that killed her first. And I found her many times overdosed. She was a wonderful woman. I was a mama's boy. My father was usually out of the house most of my life, and so I relied a lot on my mother. And she did whatever she could to take care of me and my sister. And we were fortunate enough to, at least today, break that cycle of drug addiction in our family between me and my sister, and hopefully with our children. Today I have 5 children. I have 4 boys and a 1-year-old daughter. I finally got the daughter. And my sister has a few kids of her own. And I certainly worry about it, just like you do, about how to educate our children. And I want to talk to you a little bit about what helped me growing up to stay away from drugs, and then give you a little bit of an educational component as to what you can do as parents and grandparents, and also taking care of family and friends. I always, when I talk to the parents' night, I always bring up that truly what helped me was I had some family, some uncles and a great uncle who actually lived here in Stoughton, who took me to all my sporting events. Most people thought that those were my parents, but they were really just relatives who helped support me and show me love and support. And it was also friends and friends' parents, which was a huge thing. Sports was a big part of my life, And to this day, when I see my friends' parents, I thank them for literally saving my life, letting me stay over, giving me rides to hockey, taking care of me, buying me, feeding me. All those things were huge. Coaches, Dan Marks here in Stoughton was a huge role model for me. I played hockey for him for many years. And many other teachers, Mr. Monty, who was a teacher here who taught earth science, was a huge role model for me. And at the time, I didn't see that, but as I look back now, I see how impactful they were to me. And so whether it's your own children or other people, you know when kids are struggling, I would say that it's worth reaching out, it's worth helping them, because someday they might survive, and thank you for it. And I'm really gracious for the people that helped me along the way and really paved the way for me later in life. I'm also a Marine Corps veteran, and after high school here, and I want to talk a little bit about that, kind of what the game changer is, because we all think back to when we were in high school. And when I was in high school sitting here, it was keg parties in the woods, maybe some kids were smoking marijuana, and then there was a smaller group that maybe experimented with more serious drugs. And that has changed. Only 2 or 3 years after I graduated in 1998, they were going to these parties and pills were being handed out. So if you think about, now for me, I was deathly afraid of drugs. I was okay with going to a keg party, but I was deathly afraid of going to trying drugs, because I thought the first time I tried them I was going to die, and that ultimately probably saved my life because I was deathly afraid. But if you asked me, I was 3 or 4 years younger, and I'm at a keg party and I'm drinking, and my inhibitions are lowered, would I then ingest a pill if I had the offer in front of me? I don't know. I don't know. I'd say maybe I would. Maybe I wouldn't be standing here today. And that's what's changed. The kids, although alcohol is still the most deadly drug for kids 15 to 24, these drugs are killing people rapidly. And I saw the kids 3 grades below me, and I'm still going to their deaths, get swept up in the pill epidemic in the early 2000s. Great athletes here in Stoughton who got addicted to pills. Some survived, some didn't. The game has changed. Alcohol obviously was dangerous enough. Marijuana is dangerous enough. Now add prescription pills into it. And it's not just opiates, because I know what's going on here in Stoughton High School. It's Xanax, it's depressants, anti-anxiety medications, antidepressants, stimulants, ADHD drugs. All these things are out there. And then the marijuana, which is getting higher and higher, which we'll talk about. So the game has changed. And when I taught the high school kids here last year, I was very frank with them. It was different when I was here. The game wasn't as deadly as it is now. And you're going to take a pill, and at a minimum, your life's going to change forever. That's best case scenario. Worst case scenario, you're going to die. But your life is going to change forever. Even if you find recovery later on in life, if you find recovery, your life is still going to change forever. And we don't know what is going to happen between now and the time that you find recovery. So we talk about why are they deadly. Opiate-based drugs are the most deadly in the world. So this presentation is one that we use for the kids, but I add more slides for you to give you a little bit more of an educational component on what they look like and what to look for. It's most deadly. It's the most widely abused drug. It's the deadliest drug. And I think that last bullet point there is the most impressive, because when we talk to the kids, we say, how many people here envision being IV drug users? As you can imagine, none of the hands go up. But 4 out of 5 of the IV drug users or heroin users admitted to prescription pills. And a lot of people don't realize that when we talk about opiate-based drugs, we're talking about the opium plant that's then harvested, is used for morphine and certain drugs that are used for narcotic analgesics, pain management. Heroin is the same derivative that comes off of opium. And then there's synthetic opiates, which are made in a lab that have the same exact effect, that were designed for people that have allergies to opium, and then people that have addictions where they want to try to recreate a little bit of the high, but also block opiates themselves. And we'll talk a little bit about those drugs. So when people take a Percocet, they think, well, there's no way that this is going to lead to heroin, but you're just taking a milder form of heroin that then progresses and progresses and progresses. So 4 out of 5 of these users started with the prescription medicines. Here are some of them. I talked to Stephanie today about this, about putting some pictures of pills on here. And I said, well, there's thousands of them. There's generic Percocet, there's non-generic. I mean, the bottom line is you can't be taking pills that aren't given to you by your doctor or monitored, given to you by your doctor and then monitored by parents or guardians. So these are just some of them. Hydrocodone was the most widely abused prescription drug, which is commonly referred to as Vicodin. That's hydrocodone. Methadone is a synthetic form, and methadone is was initially used for drug treatment, but it's also now being used more for pain management as well if someone has an opiate addiction. So they put them on a synthetic opiate. And it's supposed to be less addictive. Oxycodone is the most common one. When we heard about Oxycontin when it came out in the early 2000s, oxycodone is the actual active ingredient. Oxycontin just meant it was 80 milligrams of oxycodone that was time released. They called it Oxycontin. And then we have Percocet, which is goes up to 30 milligrams now. That's typically the large Oxycontin's off the market for the most part. But you can get oxycodone, Percocet, which is oxycodone in 5, 10, and 30 milligrams. And those are usually mixed with aspirin or sometimes not mixed with aspirin at all. And again, if you break your arm and there's some pain management, there are some legitimate effects to this. But if anyone saw the 60 Minutes thing that recently came up, there's clearly been some things going on with Big Pharma and the government. And from a law enforcement perspective, we really have cracked down, and some of the governor's initiatives, and hopefully soon with the president's initiatives, cracking down on doctors. And to be honest with you, I've talked to a lot of doctors. Some are just uneducated and they were trained on a pain management scale, and some were doing illegal things. But either way, something was wrong, because we got a huge influx of prescription medicines here in the United States. 3/4 of the world's opiates are consumed here in the United States. I always tell people that because we're big, bad America. We're tougher than everyone else. We're a world power. But we use 3/4 of the world's opiates. And we're not the biggest country. So it's pretty telling as to what's happening here. And we're cracking down. We are cracking down. So this is where it leads to. Heroin, I haven't seen, heroin used to be a tannish substance. But if I showed you a tannish substance, said this is what heroin looks like, I haven't seen tannish colored heroin in a long time, because it's typically mixed with fentanyl or it's cut down to a smaller form. So on the left is a lethal dose of heroin. In the middle is a lethal dose of fentanyl, and you see the difference in size between the two. And on the far right is the newest drug that we found around here. The most recent in Norfolk County was in Dedham, and that's carfentanil. And you see one little drop. That's equivalent to the 2 bottles to the side of it as far as potency. And I like the picture below because it shows the progression from prescription pills into IV drug use. Maybe it starts with snorting and then it goes to IV, but that's the progression. Pills, heroin, whether it's snorting, and then eventually injection. With any of these drugs, one suffice initially, then one isn't suffice anymore, and it becomes 2, 3, 4, 10, 20. And that's why pharmacies are getting robbed, banks are being robbed, because every milligram's $1. So if you have a 120 milligram habit, which would be small, that's $120 a day. If you're at a 300 milligram habit, it's $300 a day. So you see how quickly the numbers get out of control and why people are robbing banks. Or their drug dealer says, hey, for $10, I can give you this heroin, and that will be suffice for the day, until that one bag doesn't do it and you're up to 20 bags a day. And now you're at a 200 a day habit. This is how the progression happens. These are the recent stats here in Norfolk County. We're one of the top 20th wealthiest counties in the country. And this is what our numbers look like. Last year we were at 171, so around 180. These numbers are very conservative. So let's say about 180, we're going to 1 every other day in Norfolk County. That number 118, which I put in there last week, is up to 121 today. 121. Which we are lower than previous years. So our last quarter here in Norfolk County, we were cut in half. I'm hoping that trend continues and that we continue to see the numbers go down. What the studies are showing us is that people that were swept up in that pill epidemic in the early 2000s, they're getting sick and dying at a ferocious pace. The good news of that is the number of addicts isn't getting larger. So hopefully the problem's getting better. But if you were classified in that pill epidemic, you're getting sick and dying at a rapid pace. So we hopefully will see these numbers to start going down by early education and cracking down on prescription medicines. This is Plymouth County, where you have Brockton is probably their biggest city in Plymouth County. Numbers are pretty similar, a little bit higher than we are here in Norfolk County. You also have Plymouth. And then here's the big number, Massachusetts opioid-related deaths. So they didn't have 2017 up there, so I don't know what the numbers are. But 2,100, you divide it by 365, and we get nearly 6 people dying every day in Massachusetts. So every day of 2016, the number is actually 5.77. That's a conservative number. 6 people are dying yesterday, today, tomorrow, and that trend seems like it's continuing into 2017. 6 a day. That would wipe out this whole room in less than a week. We're going to talk about alcohol, but I was wondering if there's anything else I want to talk about opiates. Let's talk about addiction real quick before I go on to the alcohol. Stephanie had touched upon it with the whether you have alcoholism or drug addiction in your family. I am clearly at a higher genetic disposition to be a drug addict or an alcoholic because of everyone in my family, and I mean literally everyone outside of me and my sister, are drug addicts and alcoholics. I've lost one uncle. My sister's brother passed away right before my father in Florida. Her other brother's in jail. Her other brother, youngest brother, who I'm closest to, is out actively using. I haven't talked to him in a year, and he was like a big brother to me. He's still out using. And the oldest brother has been in recovery for a long time. If you have a genetic disposition, you need to talk to your children about it. If they have a mental health illness, you need to talk to them about it because they're at a higher risk for drug addiction because they're going to self-medicate if they're not being treated. Kevin Rosario, one of our speakers, talks about that. He had ADHD, was always off the walls, and I like quoting what he says. They brought him to the doctor. His mother said, the doctor said he needs to go on medication for his ADHD. His mother said, I'm not going to have my son popping pills at his age. He was shooting heroin, 4 or 5 years later. Self-medication. And he describes it very well, how that self-medicated him. First it was a beer, calmed him down. Then it was a marijuana. Then it was a pill. And you see how the progression happens. If you have both of those, which is pretty common, you're at a higher risk, a much higher risk. And we need to talk about that with our children. I'll talk about some of the things that I talk to my children about. So let's talk about alcohol. Still the leading cause of death for the 3 main things: homicide, suicide, and automobile crashes. Alcohol plays a major role in all 3 of those for kids ages 15 to 24. Still the #1 killer out there, kids driving, getting in crashes, not wearing seatbelts as that top stat tells you. So they're going out crashing. I have a little slide that I do for the kids where I went to a crash Christmas Eve, December 2010. Young girl speeding in alcohol, crashed and died. Her passenger lived. And I talk about, what a surreal moment it is for me, standing over her body and realizing how many lives are affected by this decision. And we need to talk to our kids about decisions. But that's not the most effective thing, which we're going to get into. Alcohol is a depressant. These are other depressants. When you think about depressants, anti-anxiety, antidepressants, right? So you have Xanax, which is commonly abused, Ativan, lorazepam, all these things that are used for anxiety. Think about alcohol on steroids. So we all know what a drunk person looks like. Think about that without odor and without and exaggerated, even more than someone being drunk. Those are anti-anxiety medications like this Xanax. Very, very common. It is being abused here in Stoughton. Very common. This is the most lethal and hardest drug to detox from, even more than heroin. Benzodiazepines. It's a deadly drug. We see this a lot of times in combination with opiate-based drugs. And this is what they look like. And again, there's 100 variations of what this pill looks like. But this is what, and if you find pills and you're concerned about them, go online and it's very simple. Pill imprint 51424, that's methadone. Type it in, just type in imprint, pill imprint, and whatever the number is, it's gonna tell you exactly what that is. It's very simple. You can do it from your phone. You can take a picture of it and submit it to some sites, and it will show you exactly what the pill is. So we've clearly sent the message that marijuana is not a serious drug because we've legalized it here in Massachusetts. I'm not into the debate as to whether it's good or bad. The bottom line is alcohol has been legal for a long time, and we can all agree that alcohol is not a good drug for us, right? And it is a drug. It's the same thing with marijuana. It's now being made in controlled environments, and it's more and more potent, much more potent than what was being done at Woodstock and in the 70s and 80s here. We're going to see more, there's a good percentage of kids who are in recovery right now in detoxes for marijuana, solely marijuana, more than you would think, a lot more than you would think. I was actually surprised by it. So, again, emotional development, anxiety, depression, all these types of things it leads to with marijuana. Same with alcohol. The big thing to push, I'll get into that, but we'll talk about the things. That's not a brownie. That has marijuana in it, that has THC, which is the active ingredient that makes you high in marijuana. Your kid comes home and they're ingesting a brownie right under your nose. You have no idea that it's a pot brownie. They make them in gummy bears. I'm sure you could tell the difference between that and a regular gummy bear. These are being made with THC in them. And then we have all these other candies here that are made with THC inside of them. Then we have THC oil, where they take the oil out of the marijuana, and it's a much more potent, and you see the THC levels here, 50 to 90%. We're talking regular marijuana maybe has 10%, 14% THC in it. These oils have 50 to 90%. Those are being used here in Stoughton High School. And that's how they come. And they look like a kind of an oil, or just like they look up here. Because it's basically heated out of the marijuana and it's extracted that way.
So do they eat that?
They'll eat that, correct. Yep, so you'll eat it. So what can you do? You need to have conversation with your kids. I've already started with my kids. My oldest is 10, and they go all the way down to 1, and I just talk about alcohol. The biggest thing is, if you don't do alcohol until you're 21, 21 is not a phantom number. 21 is when your brain is fully developed and you're not poisoning your brain. If you wait till 21, I don't know the exact statistics, I want to say you decrease your chance of becoming an alcoholic by 89% if you wait till you're 21. It's a high percentage. You have to talk to them about, and how I present it is, if I'm having a glass of wine or whatever, I say, listen, when you're 21, this is a poison, because it is. This is a poison, and when you're 21, you can make that decision when your brain's fully developed. I was the type of kid that if I had heard that, it would have changed my thinking, because I was smart enough to say, geez, it's a poison, I don't really want to affect my brain. We need to talk to them about those things, about waiting till you're 21. It's the same with marijuana now. When you're 21, you can decide if you want to try that. The biggest thing that we can do is set the expectations and make them very clear for our children. That is the number one factor in deterring your children from drugs and alcohol. You have to tell them what the expectations are. You will not use alcohol. You will not use drugs when you live here. I will search your room. I will do everything I can to make sure that you don't break those rules. And then the second most important thing is setting that example, obviously. Action speaks louder than words. So when we're having a 1-year-old birthday party on noon on a Saturday and every one of your friends is coming over getting annihilated, what are we setting as an expectation for them? We're saying 1-year-old birthday parties is a great time for us to get hammered and hang out and reminisce about high school. We've all done it. We've all been a part of those things. We've seen those things, but is it really what we're setting the tone for? We have to set a good example for these kids, and that is the number one thing that if you leave here with today, it's setting the expectations and then setting the example for them. Merely by the fact that you're coming here, I think, is speaking volumes about what you think about drugs and alcohol and what you want to do for your children. Be realistic and honest. If you think they're having a problem, it's not always good to, and this goes by a case-by-case basis, to say, hey, you don't do this, you don't do that. Maybe it's saying, you know, if your friends are out, you should tell them that if they drink, they're poisoning their brain. And they're at a much higher risk to be an alcoholic or a drug addict. So sometimes posing them just with that little turn by saying, hey, tell your friends this, or tell, you know, Johnny that who got caught drinking, it may change it in their mind as opposed to rebelling against what you're telling them. So what are we going to look for with changes in behavior? This is a newer slide for me, but mood swings, withdrawal from family members. You heard what Stephanie had said, which is a firsthand experience. Change in sleeping patterns, change in behavior, change in friends. I mean, because that's how it goes. I remember a kid, he's, God rest his soul, he died here in Stoughton. He was a Stoughton kid. I played hockey with him. He started smoking pot and was going in a different direction. By the time we graduated high school, he had a whole new set of friends that were into that, and the majority of them are dead now. And I had my friends that I stayed with in the hockey community. And all those kids, pretty much all of them ended up dead. Almost all of them. One recently died. Loss of interest in certain hobbies and activities. Let me talk about, so this is Narcan. It is saving lives. We can get into a debate about all kinds of things, and people in public safety have gotten in trouble about being frustrated. Why are we giving drug addicts Narcan when we do it 5 and 6 times, and then they end up overdosing and dying, which does happen. We give people Narcan and 5 or 6 times, and then they end up overdosing. The reality is we always say the same thing, right? If we change one life, it was worth it. I mean, that's kind of the thing that everyone's been preaching for years and years and years about everything, not just drug abuse. But how do we know that time? And I know some people living today, and I'm extremely jaded with the addiction process because it took both my parents' lives in their 50s. But what if that person does turn around? What if they, you know, if it was your kid, would you want them to use Narcan? I'd say so. I'd say certainly for me. So when we talk about Narcan, it's a life-saving drug. Not always, but I believe that our numbers are down because of the increased use of Narcan. If you have an addict, even if you don't have an addict, it's not bad to have. You come into Dunkin' Donuts, someone's overdosing. Yeah, I can't tell you how many I've went to inside of stores where people have overdosed and died. What are the signs and symptoms of opiates? Very simple, very simple. Pinpoint pupils. Pinpoint pupils. Depressed mood, depressed attitude, but the pinpoint pupils is a telltale sign. So if you look directly into the sun or into lighting, your pupils, the black part of your eye, is going to get really, really small. So if I'm looking around here in normal light and someone's eyes are pins, that factor alone wouldn't say, hey, this person's on opiates, but I would certainly start to look into what's causing that, coupled with other things. Pinpoint pupils is a telltale sign for opiate usage. It's the only drug that does that. Every other drug has different effects on the eyes. Narcotic analgesics, opiate-based drugs, pinpoint pupils. And that's a sign of abuse, not just a therapeutic dosage if you're on pain management, but this is an abuse of that substance causes pinpoint pupils. So this is Narcan, and these are the signs of an overdose: shallow breathing, drowsiness, extremely small pupils, disorientation, no breathing. And that's just how it happens. We don't know where they are in the process. They take the opiate, it slows down their breathing to a point where they stop. Their heart rate stops after that, and we don't know at what point we can intervene. The Narcan simply knocks that receptor, that opiate receptor, off of the brain, which immediately starts the breathing back. But we don't know. 4 milligrams, 8 milligrams, 16 milligrams, you can do as much as you can. If they're too far gone, it's not going to work. It has worked very well in a lot of circumstances. So this is a slide that I just put together for the kids because we talk about, well, what can I say? We talk about unspoken peer pressure. I'll take questions in a minute. Is that okay?
I have one question.
Okay, sure. That's okay.
For the pinpoint pupils, Visine can reverse that. I don't know if you know,
Really, pinpoint pupils. So the question was, or I guess the statement was that Visine can reverse the pinpoint pupils. That's the first I've heard of it, to be honest, but I'll look into it.
I actually, I found it on myself and then I researched it. I'm a nurse. And one of the effects of Visine is that it will dilate your pupil. And I have a family member who was an addict and there was always Visine, but we just assumed it was because he was trying to hide red eyes from either drinking or smoking weed, but come to now in hindsight.
The Visine was being, and again, what reason does your kid have Visine?
Right, exactly.
Right? So it's something, marijuana, when we get the red eyes, that would be a reason for Visine. And certainly if it's helped dilating the pupils, the body is going to fight against that. Like what I'll do, the body will fight against that, the dilation, believe it or not. It's uncontrollable.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for coming. So we talk about excuses, unspoken peer pressure. What are you going to say? Well, I'll give you something that you can do. And when I first heard it, I was thinking, that's crazy. Buy a home drug testing kit. You don't ever have to use it if you don't think you need it. But if you have it and tell your kid, listen, that drug testing kit's here. If I ever suspect something, I'm going to use it. It's a phenomenal deterrent. And you know what else it does? It gives them an out. It gives them an out. Someone offers them a drug and they say, my mom drug tested me, man. I can't do it. It gives them an out. Something to think about. When I first heard it, I was thinking, no, that's kind of crazy. Then I started thinking, and I tell the kids that. When I'm here in front of 300 kids, that's what I'm going to tell them. I know some of your parents have drug testing kits. When someone offers you a drug, tell them your parents drug test you, because they do. And it has an impact, and you see the wheels turning in some of these kids' heads because they can't fight the peer pressure. That's a very easy out, and it's something to think about. I'm not going to tell you what to do, but it's something you can certainly think about. And then these are just some things that they can come up with. How do you get help? There's all kinds of resources through the school, through the police department, through local coalitions. Stephanie usually says it, but when they found out that everyone was doing pills, as she says, she wishes she called in the Army right then and there, sent them to detox, because pills is one thing and it's dangerous enough as it is, but once the heroin starts, you're dealing with a whole different animal, a whole different animal. So, as you heard from them, not being educated and thinking, hey, this is a phase, let's just let it pass, is not the way to handle this. You need to stop it then and now, right then. Intervene as much as you can. So there's all these different resources you have, and you can get information tonight when we have questions and answers. This is a slide that I have up for the kids. I just talk about their reputation, family and friends, what they need to think about. We're going to leave questions till the end because I'm going to introduce Pat Cronin. Pat's been in long-term recovery. He's a good friend of mine. He's got a great story, and he'll tell you a little bit about his journey. Thank you. Yes. Sorry, we need this.
I don't think I need the other microphone. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you all for coming tonight. So yeah, my name is Pat Cronin. I am a person that's in recovery. I actually, September of last month, I celebrated 12 years in recovery. So thank you. So yeah, it was a journey. I love doing these presentations, and this one being specifically catered towards the parents. You know, during my daily life now, I mean, I talk to, on the way here, I was on the phone with like 2 different families, 2 different parents, trying to get their kids help. So working with families and working with parents is, I almost do that more than I do with actually other addicts today. I obviously still surround myself by people in recovery, but working with families and parents is something that I work for a treatment center now too, so that's part of why. So to be able to speak in front of a crowd of families and parents too, it's always good to get them educated. So I don't have much time, so I'm just really quick. I did come from a totally functional household. I had a mother, I had a father, both worked hard. We had Sunday dinners. We did what we thought families would do. You fast forward, to the end, I still did Oxycontin and I became a homeless heroin addict. Okay. So since this epidemic has happened, you hear a lot of different stuff. And sometimes you hear stuff that, I see as not really true, because a lot of times, my parents did the whole, what did I do wrong, and it wasn't their fault, There was no education when I was in high school, when I went in college, and I don't blame that on like my high school or college. I just think that like 15 years ago, 20 years ago, it was still that like, if we don't talk about drugs, it's not happening, Because once you start talking about drugs and once you start talking about this being an issue, you have to actually do something about it. And I still don't think everyone is willing to do anything about this. Though we've come a long way from where we were, even say 10 years ago, starting, as John said, starting very young is critical. Any family that I work with now, I say, it doesn't matter. I've spoken in schools with, how young? What's the lowest we've went to? Fifth grade. So 15 years ago, that would just not be allowed. Like, no way. Like, I've even heard stuff like, if you talk to them about drugs, they're going to want to do it. I hear a lot of stuff that I just, okay. I'm glad that you're doing what you're doing here. The more and more schools that I see do this, it gives me hope. But like I said, I came from a normal family. I don't know why I ended up doing what I did. I had every opportunity to succeed in life, but as like young adults, when we're in school, at least for me, I wasn't okay with who I was. Like, I thought everyone was like talking about me, and I thought that this clique, if I didn't act a certain way with this clique or act like this way with a certain clique, that like I was a people pleaser. But how I acted on the outside was totally like, I thought I was the great I am. Like, I had this ego, I had this pride, but inside I was like riddled with fear. So what we see now is, that's a common feeling for a young adult, especially in high school or even lower. The problem is the accessibility to drugs, specifically prescription pills these days, gives it just way more access to kids when they're going through that, as opposed to talking about it, as opposed to like going to teachers and going to, guidance counselors and so forth. So I know when I was in high school, like if I ever thought about going to somebody like in an administration in a school and talking to them about like me having an issue, that would like automatically mean like expulsion, detention. Like, there was a lot of that fear when I was in school, and I see that as that was and is a huge barrier still. I think that a lot of the schools have come a long way. I know we work with Brockton schools a lot, and there's a lot of other schools that we work with that they want to help people, but I still see that a lot of kids are like afraid they might get in trouble. I know legalities like play a role in this too, but I think the more that we talk about that kind of stuff, and I know that like I didn't feel like I could do that when I was in school, so I think that's a big part. I didn't really have to run from anything like growing up. Like I said, I had plenty of opportunities to succeed, but maybe that might have been the issue too. I felt entitled to everything that I had. I had a lot of arrogance. I felt like I deserved more to do less. And, when I started, and my story is a lot different than a lot of other kids, because a lot of kids start drinking at like 12, 13, 14, 15, like by the fire, the kegs and all that. And then it progresses. Like, that wasn't my story. I started late. But I started before 21. But my story was like a lot later than that. Like, I didn't even really start drinking till I was like in college. And usually you hear people drinking a lot, younger than that. I'm different. My body's wired differently than other people. I picked up a drink and my body reacts different. And I react different to alcohol and drugs than other people do. I can't put alcohol in me without something just crazy happening. That's just how I'm wired. I didn't know that when I was doing it though. And I blacked out a lot in college, and I didn't get in trouble per se, but I was doing a lot of bad things when I was in college, for sure. I just didn't get caught, and that just dragged it out even longer and longer. And I was getting good grades, and I was on the dean's list, so it looked good. But the reason why I was on the dean's list was because I was cheating in school, and I was buying papers online. You know what I mean? So like, there's a spiritual loss of values when you get involved in addiction, and whatever I could do to cover up to make myself be able to drink and drug the way that I wanted to, that's what I did. So that's like part of my story. And unfortunately, I grew up in the Oxycontin epidemic, and my graduation party from college, that was the first time I ever took a pill. And like you heard, John talk about that, it will change your life forever, and it did. That one pill changed my life forever. Now I am in recovery, but still, with that being said, my whole life has changed. I wouldn't change my life at all from where I am now, but I can say that because I didn't die. But most of the people that have gone down the path that like I have associated with, that did the drugs I did, have died. So I'm blessed that I got opportunities and I got treatment in Massachusetts, but it took me down fast. And it wasn't like anything nice and pretty. Just because I came from a good family, and I went to, I went to Savarian Brothers High School, and I went to Suffolk in Boston. It doesn't matter that I went to these schools and I came from a good family, because I still ended up on the streets like other addicts. I ended up robbing drug dealers like other drug addicts. I ended up being arrested numerous times by law enforcement. I always say it's very funny now. Like, I do so much work with law enforcement now, and I was being chased by them often when I was doing what I was doing. And I was arrested multiple times for drugs. And so it just shows you like what recovery can do for somebody. But like I said, my life, the way that I was, going on with my life because of, that one oxy that led me to heroin. And every person that I encountered, especially like people in treatment and nurses and doctors, told me that like oxys is going to go to heroin. But I thought that I was different, and I just shook my head like, I said, no, it's not going to be me. And, I found out the hard way that was going to be me. And then I found out that like alcohol is a drug. I heard that, a lot of good stuff tonight. Like, if you're an addict, you can't drink. Like, my parents didn't get that either. So like I tried quite oftenly to go out and just have a few drinks, and I didn't realize that like, your receptors in your brain for like opiates or drugs are affected by the same way as alcohol. And I didn't realize that alcohol will set off my receptors to go get opiates. So when I had to look at my history and see like when I was going in and out of treatment, that alcohol was playing a role in me going back to drugs, I didn't understand that like you're clean. You're either clean or you're not. And that goes for alcohol too. And my parents learned that from going to learn to cope. And then I went back into treatment, and I realized, okay, I got to put down the alcohol too. And ever since I put down alcohol, I haven't used drugs either in 12 years. So, a lot's happened in my life since I've been in recovery. Being a part of the No First Time Foundation is a big part of my recovery. Giving back to other addicts and alcoholics is my number one. When I wake up every day, my purpose is, who can I help stay sober? That's what I was taught that I need to do if I want to stay sober. So that's what I try to do every day. I helped open up a treatment center in Quincy about a year and a half ago. So we're trying to help as many addicts and alcoholics that we can now. And I try to give as much time as I can to the No First Time Foundation, because what they do is amazing. And as much education that we can put in the schools with parents, anybody that's interested in this is the way to go. So with that, I'll stop. Thank you.